Effects of the chlorine industry on the environment and living beings is a controversial topic that many of us are unaware of, even though it plays a huge role in our everyday lives. Chlorine production is very beneficial, both economically and in regards to everyday use by society. Caustic soda and chlorine are produced together as co-products of a reaction called the chlor-alkali process. Both possess useful properties that make them marketable to consumers, which yield high profits for companies in the industry. 35% of chlorine production is used for PVC plastic, commonly used in plumbing, and another 10% goes towards water treatment. These examples, among many others, are why 40% of the Earth's population is dependent on chlorine and caustic soda products. The US and China are currently the two main countries utilizing caustic soda and chlorine production, but it is expected to increase in most parts of the world. The controversy stems from the fact that some people are worried about the potential harmful effects of chlorine production has on the environment, and about the dangers of dissociated chlorine to humans.
Those against the production of chlorine say that although it seems that the production of chlorine can be very beneficial for our society, it may also be linked with many harmful effects for both humans and the environment. Chlorine alone is an abundant element in nature and is found most commonly joined with sodium as a salt molecule that poses no threat to human health or the environment due to its stability. However, when chlorine is dissociated from sodium through the chlor-alkali process, it becomes a deadly gas that is highly toxic to humans. Not only should this deadly gas raise concerns, but the synthesized organochlorines that chemists are making do not break down easily in nature. The property of perseverance paired with insolubility in water makes these chemicals prime candidates for bioaccumulation in the fatty tissue of living organisms. Chlorine-based compounds are not acutely toxic like deadly chlorine gas, but if there is sufficient exposure over a long period of time, they might have detrimental effects on body systems, for example, the reproductive, endocrine, and immune systems, and can also be carcinogenic.
Despite the fact that dissociated chlorine is a deadly gas, those involved in the industry try to recombine it into a more stable form as soon as possible. Chlorine products have many uses that humans benefit from on a daily basis. Although organochlorines have a bad reputation related to their use as pesticides, such as DDT, there are some that are safe enough to be consumed as food and medicine. Many have been approved by the Food and Drug Administration for pharmaceutical use in antibiotics and antidepressants, as well as in sweeteners such as Splenda. Another beneficial use of chlorine is when it is used in water purification. This prevents the spread of waterborne disease by making our water fit to drink and by providing some consumers with clean water for their swimming pools. In addition, chlorine is used to produce medical equipment and, of course, the above-mentioned PVC plastic. Although chlorine is obviously very useful, its co-product, caustic soda, is often considered to be even more desirable. Caustic soda is widely used in cleaning products such as detergents, soaps, and drain cleaners, as well as in the manufacturing of paper. There is such a high demand for caustic soda that industries are continuously looking for useful outlets for chlorine gas. Very little is known about how harmful chlorine-based compounds are to the environment. Without solid evidence and research, it seems absurd to shut down an industry that employs thousands of people and provides products that millions of consumers would consider to be essential.
Not only has the chlorine industry began to introduce safer production methods, they've also stopped CFC production, which is the main component of ozone depletion. In this case, there was research done that clearly showed a causative effect of CFCs on the ozone being depleted. Accordingly, action was taken to cease CFC production and allow the ozone layer to repair itself. This is completely different from the case of chlorine-based products because there is no obvious damage that can be completely attributed to them, as was the case for CFCs. If the benefits are high and the risks are low, industry proceeds with production, says Larry Burton. The opposing side discusses how scientists cannot prove the safety of chlorine production and that they cannot quantify all the aspects of what is going on in regards to the environment. This can undoubtedly be seen as a risk, but at the same time, there are no alarming numbers or rates of destruction being presented. Companies are working towards sustainable development, which is defined as meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs.
In the past, environmental protection was viewed as a drain on profits, but since the 1980s, we have been focusing on pollution prevention, which has paid for itself by reducing waste and fees associated with it. The producers are utilizing excellent studies done by toxicologists and epidemiologists and are willing to remove any unsafe products from the market. The companies also say that they fully abide to the definition of sustainable development through the Responsible Care Program. Adequate testing has not been performed to yield results that necessitates the stopping of chlorine production. There are over 11,000 organochlorines synthesized with the substantial amounts of testing on the way. Until those tests can actually quantify any detrimental effects, chlorine production should not cease.
I'm waking up to ash and dust. I wipe my brow and I sweat my rust. I'm breathing in the chemicals.
An ethical perspective that is relevant to chlorine production and pollution is biocentrism. Biocentrism is the idea that non-human species have inherent value and that nature does not exist simply to be used by humans. Paul Taylor explains this in his essay, The Ethics of Respect of Nature, that humans should make a moral commitment to treat all living organisms, including humans, as having equal inherent worth. This means that there is no value differentiation between humans and wild organisms. Taylor's main belief about biocentrism is that humans are non-privileged members of Earth's community of life, and the natural world is an interdependent system. The ecological equilibrium must not be destroyed. All organisms are pursuing their own good in their own way, and human beings are not inherently superior to other living things. Whenever humans do something that has possible negative effects on the environment, biocentrism is often brought up to evaluate whether it is right or wrong. In this particular case, it does not seem that humans are acting superiorly to animals or the environment, because the only solid evidence of negative effects from chlorine gas involve the negative effects that it has on humans. It would be a different story altogether if humans were performing these chlor-alkali reactions and utilizing the products formed at the expense of animals and the environment. It seems less wrong when humans are willing to take risk of toxicity to themselves in order to acquire the products from this reaction. This is just another example in the long list of things humans do to themselves despite the risk factor because the overall outcome is more desirable. It was suggested in the reading that statistics show an increase in the incidences of cancer and that it is possible that our increased use of chlorine-based products may have some correlation. To that, we would have to argue that it would be absolutely impossible to see the isolated effects that these products have on human health because you can't isolate a human into only getting exposure to these products and nothing else. In addition to this, many humans actively participate in activities that are confirmed to be carcinogenic, such as smoking and tanning anyway. There are so many other possible reasons for the increased incidence of cancers, such as the fact that humans are living longer or the fact that advancement of medical knowledge is giving doctors the ability to more accurately diagnose cancer. That being said, it is necessary to recognize the negative effects that chlorine gas has on humans as a potential risk if we are exposed to it. Eric Hansen points out that the industry cannot sell caustic soda unless they find outlets for chlorine gas. This suggests that the industry doesn't just let chlorine gas fly around everywhere. Obviously, there are regulations that keep that in check, and people who are dealing with these chlor-alkali reactions are well aware of the risk of exposure. Anyone who has access to an MSDS would be able to know exactly how much harm is caused by a given amount of exposure.
Aldo Leopold also has a relevant ethical perspective. Leopold wrote The Land Ethic to help guide human actions when using the land. He felt that there was a need for an ethic that dealt with humans' relation to the land and the animals and plants that reside on it, because the ecological actions of human beings can be detrimental to the ecosystem. As a result, the phrase environmental ethics was introduced, which is defined as the right and wrong in ecology. The right position tilts toward eco-balance, while the wrong position tilts toward pollution. Ecologically, the right position indicates the preservation of species diversity and sustaining productivity. A thing is right when it tends to preserve the integrity, stability, and beauty of the biotic community. It is wrong when it tends to do otherwise. Leopold stresses that it is our responsibility to maintain the health of an ecosystem. Leopold's land ethic is very important to consider for this issue too. Although there is concern for the environment in regard to chlorine production, I don't feel that it is violating the land ethic in any confirmed way. It was said that relatively little is known about how organochlorines work or the extent of the damage. In addition to lack of data and proof in the reading, we were hard-pressed to find anything about current negative effects of chlorine on the environment from a basic Google search. There's definitely been use of harmful chlorine compounds such as DDT and CFCs in the past, but those practices were stopped because they showed irrefutable evidence that it was extremely harmful. This, in addition to the efforts being made by companies to be more environmentally conscious, upholds the responsibility we have to maintain the health of the ecosystem.
The general idea of pragmatism is that practical strategies should be used to deal with specific situations. Pragmatists emphasize developing these strategies so that environmental ethics can actually contribute to the resolution of environmental problems, as opposed to just being an ethic for educating people. Pragmatism looks at nature as a whole, such as web or constellation where everything connects to everything in some way. Therefore, you cannot simply just come up with a single strategy or intrinsic value, because it overlooks the reality that everything in nature is interconnected and complex. Even if there were studies done that showed definitive evidence of chlorine production being harmful to the environment, we as humans would have a very hard time changing our ways because there are so many examples of how we use chlorine and caustic soda in our everyday lives. Perhaps a more practical strategy would be to come up with alternatives so that we would have something to switch over to if it ended up being necessary. This would be much more useful than simply stating that we need to phase out chlorine production.
In Peter Singer's essay, Not for Humans Only, he talks about the issue of animal welfare. He describes sentience as something that is common between humans and animals. He stresses equality, not equity. Singer thinks that all sentient animals, humans and non-humans alike, should have equal consideration based on their particular interest. His main point is that choices should be made in a way that promotes the greatest good for the greatest number of beings, and also that we should not cause needless suffering to animals, but that pain and suffering is sometimes justified if greater human or non-human welfare is increased. After much consideration, we have come to the opinion that the chlorine industry should be allowed to continue producing chlorine-based products and caustic soda. There are multiple reasons for this conclusion, the most important being that the continuation of these practices allows for the greatest amount of good for the greatest amount of people. There is a long list of people who benefit from the use of chlorine products. Farmers benefit by protecting their crops, as well as the people who eat their produce. People who rely on chlorine and caustic soda products to clean their water, clothes, and machinery benefit, as well as those that rely on the medical equipment and drugs that are produced. Finally, there are benefits for the countless people that have jobs related in this industry. As for who is losing, we think the main point is that we don't actually know who is losing and by how much. We know the risk factors, but as said by Eric Hansen, relatively little is known about how they work or the extent of the damage. The better question may be who would be losing if the chlorine industry wasn't allowed to continue production.